Hey guys, how's everyone doing this week? Hope everyone's doing well. Best replacements for Rafinha? I don't know why do you need a replacement for Rafinha at this point in time? Are we looking at someone a little bit lower in price or someone higher up in price? Keep or sell Antonio? I think if you have quite a bit of value stocked up on Antonio and you have some other problems in your team, then I would keep him. If you think that Antonio is someone that you can move and that you're very happy with the rest of your team, then I completely understand selling Antonio in that situation. Hey Henry, how are you doing? And Rio, hey Rio, how are you doing? You did -4 to replace Chilwell by Alonso. So I've seen that move actually quite a bit this week, and I can understand that if you didn't have a strong bench this week. Let's say if you had to play Livramento as a starter. Um, But from my point of view, I wasn't a huge fan of that move. I prefer the move in the subsequent week, right, where you get to play versus Watford, and maybe you get to at least watch what's going on with Chelsea versus United and the impact of Conte's injury as well. Hey Harold, I hope your free hit went well. Um, Chue Hang, thoughts on bringing Bowen? I still think that you want to hold a few weeks, right? There are a couple of midfielders who still have better fixtures right now than Bowen. And in my opinion, it would make a lot more sense to hold on to those players at this moment in time and then switch into Bowen, I think, post the Arsenal game. So if I look at um, West Ham, I would only really like to get Bowen maybe around game week 16, maybe game week 18 if he's not a priority at that point. Because in that run, I think he's quite interesting as a double up with Antonio. So that's how I feel about Bowen. Yeah, you can send in your team, Brandon, on Twitter. My DMs are open. Samar says, hi, Fran. Hey, Samar, how are you doing? Johnny says, Gallagher, Jota, or Bernardo Silva. I think this week the priority is Jota just due to the fixture. Tech XEO, bench one out of Rafinha, Rudiger, and Tony. I'd say make a decision probably between Rafinha and Rudiger. I'm tempted to say bench Rudiger, just because of the specific fixture. But yeah, who'd you prefer in Game Week 13, Rafinha or Duffy Def from Brighton? Definitely Rafinha, in my opinion. I would like to play Rafinha. Um, yes, I did bring in Jota, actually. I took in Jota for a -4. This was something I did in the previous night because, as I mentioned in my kind of team selection, one of my worries is that Pep Guardiola takes quite a cautionary approach with players. I think whenever he sees an injury now, especially due to the experience with De Bruyne and him constantly getting injured after kind of playing too early, Pep's learned his lesson with some of his players and he takes the safe approach now. So I think Pep will probably rest Foden. And even if Foden's not rested, I just don't think he's going to get enough minutes to be worth it versus West Ham, who are probably going to be quite a tough matchup for City. If you look traditionally, actually, West Ham have done quite well versus City as an example. And from my point of view as well, when I'm looking into Jota this week, I think the fixture is lovely. Aman Khan says, hey Fran, to avoid playing a Southampton player against Liverpool, would you take a hit for Livra to Alonso, a hit for Armstrong to Benteke, or just play Williams? Yeah, I completely understand. So, as I said, for the people who don't want to play Livermento this week, I can understand taking a hit for Alonso. I think that's totally fine. To be quite honest, I'd probably take the hit, Livramento to Alonso. I also think United will score, but the benefit of having Alonso is that you're not just keeping him for defensive returns, right? And he seems like an option that you can keep for quite a long time, especially due to the impact of the Chilwell injury, because you're talking probably around 8 game weeks. My Twitter link doesn't work. That might be because my Twitter handle might have changed actually. Um, my Twitter handle is Total Tactics FPL. I'll actually have to change that. Thanks for reminding me. Um, Gorov, Rafinha I feel is a season keeper. Unbelievable value for that price. Can score against any team. Sancho and Rashford could be in demand in a few weeks' time. I like Rafinha as a season keeper. I think he's obviously, in the preseason we were talking about Rafinha being extremely underpriced, and the form has remained. He's basically been carrying this Leeds team afloat for a while now. And the only issue is that when you actually look at that sea of fixtures, right, where it gets tough, like here, when can I really justify keeping Rafinha over Chelsea, Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool? It's almost, for me, it almost seems like a 4-week vacation, right? As a Rafinha owner. I might have to say goodbye to my good friend Rafinha for a few weeks then. Rafinha or Foden out for Jota. I'd probably take Foden out this week. It's a weird one, actually. I think it comes down to your bench, right? Because it depends on whether, let's say, keeping Foden is something that you can allow for this week. Because, for example, people who have Livramento coming in, if Foden doesn't play, would probably like to take Foden out for Jota. But maybe if you're planning to remove Rafinha, which I still think the fixtures are really good for 2 weeks, by the way, for Rafinha. Maybe that's the alternative option where you go for Rafinha. Alex Riley says Chilwell / Rafinha to Reguilon / Jota for -4. Honestly, I really wouldn't recommend going from Chilwell to Reguilon. I can't really condone it because I just think that Reguilon doesn't have the same sort of value as some of the other top forwards in the game, in my opinion. I really think if we've been looking at Tottenham the last few weeks, they've been extremely poor defensively. I don't think they've actually kept a clean sheet since that Everton game. I mean, conceding 2 goals versus a very pedestrian side as well in the midweek just wasn't a good look. So that's my key issue. I would love to bring in Jota, but I think if you could, I would rather you just maybe downgrade Chilwell this week instead. I know Jota has a lovely fixture. Maybe if there's a way you actually can go for Chilwell to Alonso and Jota, I would be a little bit happier with that. But it seems like maybe you don't have enough money for that. I just really think Reguilon is a bit of a trap. Especially if you're replacing a starter, right? Because that's what Chilwell is. I wouldn't be too comfortable starting Reguilon for several weeks and then maybe transferring him out when the fixtures get tough, if that makes sense. Because ideally you'd like to have a defender playing for quite a long time. That's my opinion though, Alex. I do think Jota will probably get you a lot of value, but I just think that maybe just going from Chilwell to Alonso this week makes more sense. I'll fix my Twitter link in a second, Brandon. Sorry about that. Whom should I bench, Rafinha or Tony? Probably Rafinha. I think Tony has a slightly better fixture. Should you keep Foden? I actually think, yeah, you should keep Foden on your team if you can afford to, and you have a decent bench this week. My issue is that I had a poor bench, which is why I wanted to take Foden out, because I didn't want to play Livramento. Back 5 of 2 Chelsea, 2 Man City, and Trent his way forward. I actually think that's a fantastic idea. I'd be happy with that, especially owning Diaz over that kind of December run. Had Foden and Silva for the last 3 game weeks, and Foden's injury has made it a lot easier who to keep, while also freeing up. Yeah, in a sense, right? Where I think basically what we've seen in the last few weeks is that Bernardo Silva seems to be quite a good hedge into Foden, and you can get a lot of cost savings like that. So I agree. What is my league code? Let me find that for you. I'm going to type the league code in the chat. There you go. William / ESR to Alonso / Gallagher for a hit. I wouldn't take I wouldn't take a hit this week, right? Because for me, I don't think Alonso has the greatest of games. I also think that Smith Rowe has a good game versus Newcastle, which I wouldn't miss, if that makes sense. White to Alonso for a -4, that's not a bad move. Easy Weezy, you've taken a hit. Very, very nice. Yeah, Brandon, I can check your tweet. Monsieur Janga. What transfers would you do? Help. Honestly, when I'm looking at your team, right? So who do we start this week? We probably start Vardy. We start Saka. We start Salah. We start Rafinha. 4 players. Probably Mbeumo, to be honest. That's 5 players right now. We start Rudiger, 6. We start Trent, 7. Probably reluctantly play Antonio, 8. Maybe we play... I think you would actually play Duffy this week, because there is a chance that I think Brighton can get a nice clean sheet. And then you play Schmeichel. Maybe you actually just... Because you actually can play it 10 players. I wonder if you actually spend both your free transfers. I would be quite tempted, to be honest, to just go Jota and James, though, from Foden and Chilwell, if that's something you're interested in. Or you could just maybe move away from Chilwell this week and then save up the money to make to move someone like Mbumo in the next week. But I just think that you can attack the Jota fixture for sure, and he's probably someone I'd like to attack through dropping Foden. The alternative is maybe you don't make the Chilwell transfer this week and you just attack your midfielders. Perhaps some people would say that maybe Saka doesn't hold great value in your team. It could be just, but I still wouldn't move away from Saka. It's just too good a fixture. For me, the problem is just, what Foden does to your starting 11, and then Chilwell, unfortunately, should be people to address. So I think if you keep it simple, you just go James and Jota, who should last you for quite a while. Yassine, I hope you're doing well as well. What are your thoughts on this? Honestly, people have suggested triple Chelsea, and I don't have a problem with it. If you want to play triple Chelsea, you want to play a back five, I completely respect that. Well done. Sean's team here. You don't like the fact that you still have Marcel, but he could start this game against Norwich. You're tempted to keep him. I would actually think that Ait Nouri seems to have locked down the position in the meantime. But I guess it's fine though. I guess it's fine because it's not the worst. Do you have a free transfer though? I just need to kind of know what the situation is with your transfers. Shui Heng, thoughts on your team? I really like your team for this week, to be honest. Totally fine. And good selection of double Chelsea players. And you've got Bowen as well, ready to go in a few weeks' time. That's fantastic. And you've got really good depth. Really like your team. Afghan Harold. You have 8 mil for a striker if you get rid of Huang. But what are you going to spend that 8 mil for, if that makes sense? I'd rather you just upgrade your defense. I generally think this season is all about maybe improving our defense. I would definitely change Steele into Foster, by the way. I still think that kind of little bit of money spent is worth having a good sub keeper who's actually starting. So being able to pick Watford in their good games might be worth it for you, especially since Wolves are going to have tough games as well coming up. If you really want to go for Sa, who is, for me, a little bit overpriced, I'd go Ramsdale still, even though I know Sa has nice fixtures coming up. And you're attacking, I guess, the Norwich fixtures. Yeah, for me, I would spend the kind of money that you have, honestly, in another defender so that you can actually have a back four. That's my personal opinion. I think this season has been calling or crying out for back fours. I would just go Alonso. Unless you're on a free hit, sorry. But you are on a wild card, so that's fine. Use your transfer on Jota to avoid price wars. Yeah, I completely understand just playing this week without a -4. That's fine. Brandon, start or bench Cornet. I'd start Cornet, but who do we bench? It's a tricky one, actually. Yeah, I'd probably bench Cornet then, in that sense. That's fine. I'm happy with you benching Cornet. All right, let's just go back to the stream chat. Should keep it on my team for now while I actually respond to some of the comments. Hi, Fran. At what points do I ditch Jamie Vardy? He has scored poorly last few weeks, and despite good upcoming fixtures, you're losing patience. Yeah, I can completely understand JB. I think you probably give him this Watford game, and then if he doesn't haul in this game, you're probably worth moving away from him. I don't think there's clearly a lot of forwards who make a lot of sense. Harold, sorry, did you tweet at me, Harold? My bad. Yeah, of course, sorry, this is the free hit. Yeah, I think maybe, I don't know. I guess Saw makes a bit more sense with Norwich. Yeah, I like this team for this week. Sorry about that, Harold. I completely didn't notice that was you, actually. Because it says, yeah, sorry. I should have known it was a free hit. Good shout there. 2.2 mil. An 8 mil striker. It's a tricky one, though, isn't it? There's not many good value 8 mil strikers around. Let's have a look at some of the forwards. I mean, I wouldn't play St. Maximin today. Benteke, I wouldn't necessarily play either. I think you probably just keep Hwang, to be honest. Um, you could go Kane over Son, to be honest, Harold. That's the alternative if you actually think Kane would be a little bit more interesting. Up to you though. Rajan says you did Aspi to James. You got 1.6 million. Do you think you should take a -4 for Henry to Livramento to Alonso Reguilon? I wouldn't do it this week. I'm not a huge fan of Reguilon right now. I think Everton have been very poor from a goal scoring point of view, so you're actually fine to keep Henry this week. I wouldn't take the -4 for a defender because for me, like I would only take a -4 if Livramento is playing. But actually, the players that you have playing look good to me, and the fact that Antonio is your first on bench is actually quite nice. You're not comfortable with Rafinha, Antonio, and Chilwell. Any advice? Yeah, I would probably take... tricky one. So, who are we playing this week? We're playing Reguilon, James, Cancelo, Trent. That's 4 players. Then we have another 4 in the midfield. Honestly, I would still play Rafinha this week. I know Rafinha doesn't have the best fixture versus Brighton because Brighton have actually traditionally done quite well versus Brighton. But I'd be happy to roll the transfer here because maybe you just play this 4-4-2. Or maybe play a 4-5-1 in a sense where I guess Foden is maybe if you want to risk Foden. I would just save the Chilwell transfer for the next week. And the thing is, like, the way your team looks with me, you keep Foden past the knock and then you have him for wonderful fixtures. You don't really need to target Jota, in my opinion. And I think Rafinha you would keep still because the next 2 fixtures after that are really good for Rafinha. I'd probably be more focused around keeping your money in the bank this week. I think that's fine. FPL Robbie, which one would you prioritize? Chilwell to Alonso or Foden to Jota? Let's see. So a little bit of a weak bench here this week. This week I'd prioritize Foden to Jota for me personally. Adds, hey Fran, hope you're doing well. I'm surprised where he hasn't made your cheat sheet. I agree, but I think it's because I have Mitchell in my cheat sheet, right? So Mitchell for me makes a bit more sense at this time being. He obviously isn't probably going to get many attacking dividends, but it'll be interesting. Following template or searching for some differences, the frequency of matches will result in player rotation. Maybe it is worth taking a risk with some unusual choice. I mean, I've got an unusual choice. I've got Cornet. But I really think that, the idea that you need true differential picks isn't really necessary to rank up. I actually think having the right team, having solid players who will consistently hold week on week will do you good. If you look at, for example, some of the top 5 ranked players in the world, they don't have any unconventional picks, right? They've just owned the right players in the right time who all actually have tremendously decently high ownership. It's not like those players are owning someone who's extremely out of the blue that no one has. Good luck to you this week, Craig, as well. Chilwell to Alonso thoughts. I think you can go Chilwell to Alonso if it's a side grade. That's totally fine, and that you're actually happy to do that, and you don't have any problems in your team. But if you have problems in your team, I'd focus on those first. Does Brighton defense no longer look tight as start of the season? I would actually say so, yeah. How many game weeks till Firmino is back? I think Firmino could be playing as soon as next week, it seems like. But for me, the benefit of owning Jota is you can probably keep him for this run, and then actually keep him during the African Cup of Nations run as well, where he'll be playing consistently. Thoughts on captaining Trent over Salah? I wouldn't do it, but if you're feeling risky, why not? Rudiger and Edouard to Trent and Pukki for -4. Got James ready or Mount to Cornet instead of selling Edouard. I would definitely sell Edouard. I would definitely go Rudiger to Trent. I mean, the thing is, I would like you to play a back 4. But if you want to keep a back 3, I can understand that transfer. Is Pukki the one for you, though? That is a good question. I would actually maybe hold King for a while if you can afford to keep him on your bench. Is Foden injured? So Foden came off a bit of an injury in the previous week. And Pep is basically saying that he's not taking chances with Foden. Foden has been in individual training, which means he hasn't been training with the team. It's probably a situation where Foden doesn't play this week. And even if he does, he's going to be playing very limited minutes. By the way, guys, just as a quick sidebar, if you could quickly like the video, that would be really appreciated. That really helps with the algorithm. But yeah, this is my team this week, just to show you guys. And keep it there for a while. Shui Heng, 0.3 mil in your bank right now. Honestly, I would roll the transfer this week because I think you've got a good enough team to play this week. I really don't have any issues with this team. I would roll for it. I would probably move Antonio in the subsequent week. It really depends, though. It's kind of weird that you have Bone at this point in time. Maybe you got Bone a bit earlier and you actually benefited from him, so respect to you for that. But I guess I still wouldn't really like to have two West Ham assets during this period, so maybe make a decision between one or the other. Potentially, it could just be Antonio to Jimenez this week if you just want to capitalize on that. But the thing is, it seems like a very, very short-term transfer because the turnaround between Jimenez having good games and bad games is almost as similar as Antonio having bad games and good games conversely. So it's up to you whether you want to do that. Jack Buckley, hey Fran, any thoughts? Yeah, I really like this team. Honestly, it seems like you have so many good fixtures in hand as well. So I love the team. I'm feeling pretty jealous of people who've got Jimenez right now, to be honest. Been planning on downgrading Antonio plus selling Simicast for James for a solid back four. With Foden's minutes in question this week, do you think it's worth a -4 to complete both moves this game week? Okay, so let's say Foden's injured. What happens to us this week if we take Simicast out? And we play... The thing is, right, dropping Antonio... Who are we dropping Antonio for this week? And then Simicast to James... I can understand that, but it's not like... I really don't think James has got the best... Yeah, I mean, I guess Simicast probably doesn't play because Robertson plays. You play Son, Saka, Rafinha, Salah, so you got 4 there. You definitely play Hwang, you definitely play Tony, you got 6. And then you've got a guaranteed 3 playing, so you really just need a 10th player. I'd be tempted to roll the transfer and play Duffy this week if I were you, to be completely honest. The reason why I say that is because I don't see the point of dropping Antonio specifically this week to go for a -4. Do you know what I mean? I just don't think it's worth it. And then next week, you've still got a very strong team when you make that double transfer and you don't lose any money for it. Hi, Fran. Currently 0 in the bank. You're thinking Chilwell to Alonso this week. You can't afford James. Any idea how I can improve my bench for the busy fixture congestion? So I do think all the people talking about worrying about benches, I wouldn't worry too much. I think your bench is strong enough. You know, having Livermento, he's not playing Liverpool every week, so I wouldn't worry about that. I guess Foden is a little bit of someone who does get affected by the fixture congestion. Most of the players on your team, though, probably won't be affected too much or will outperform the fixture congestion, if you understand what I'm saying. So someone like Jota, we've seen that he has the ability to actually do well off the bench as well, so I wouldn't really worry too much about him. I'm sure he'll feature and play well. Antonio is someone who seems to be rested specifically for Premier League games, so I expect that he'll be playing. I guess if you really wanted to make a transfer, it'd probably be just in the midfield, maybe upgrading someone like Bissouma to an enabler. But I don't know whether you have the money for that. I would focus on probably moving Chilwell into Alonso. I agree with you there. You want to captain Foden, though. Interesting choice. I would please advise you to change your captaincies, though, if that's all right. You accidentally transferred Neves. Interesting. I think it's a good team for this game week. Hopefully Neves can score a free kick goal for you, but otherwise you've definitely got to move Neves again, unfortunately. Yeah, apologies about that, but I still think it's a decent team for the week. I guess maybe your question as well is maybe if you'd like to play Saint Maximin this week as well. Maybe I'd still play Neves. Chirag. So is Foden playing? Should you go for Jota for Foden? Make my starting 11, please. Should you drop Antonio? Look, I would drop Foden for Jota this week if your bench is poor, and your bench is similar to mine. It is quite poor. I would definitely do it. I've done the move myself. So I would just play Jota, Gallagher, Rafinha, Salah, Tony, Kane. 6 players. Yeah, I mean, your team plays itself. I would put Antonio on the bench as well. I'm going to quickly turn into the YouTube chat quickly just to have a look. Why wouldn't you captain Trent? So for me, I think Salah can explode more than Trent. I think that, for example, when you look at last week versus Arsenal, where they did extremely well, I thought Salah could have realistically got 2 goals and 1 assist, where that is the type of game that would get him an explosive haul. I think Trent is quite a consistent player, and he probably will get the clean sheet this week, but there's no guarantees there. I just think that captaincy-wise, since I own both players, I'd rather pick the player who I think will get the most amount of points, and for me, that's always going to be Salah, unfortunately, over Trent. Read on Twitter that the Liverpool game can be called off due to bad weather. Yeah, I've heard an update from this from someone actually living in Liverpool, and it doesn't seem like it could be that bad news. Obviously, though, if the game was called off, I would literally be crying because I've done a -4 for Jota. So we'll see what happens there. Would you hold Tierney? I probably wouldn't hold Tierney. I'd like to move him away just because that kind of extra money can be moved into hopefully what could be a Chelsea defender or someone who you play much more consistently. What are your thoughts on new manager bounce for Man United Newcastle? So I mean, part of the new manager bounce also depends on who the manager is coming in, right? Usually what happens is people actually are bringing in better managers and therefore the new manager bounce has an impact. I think with Rangnick, I think they will definitely benefit from the new manager bounce. I think he's, an acclaimed manager, someone who actually has a legacy and a history in terms of creating competent tactical sides and doing well with teams and kind of pushing them forward. So I think this United side will greatly benefit from him. As far as Eddie Howe, I think he's done well as well in his kind of stint with Bournemouth, but it really depends on whether or not you would say this Newcastle team is a bit weak, right? Because the issue with Newcastle, I think, is just personnel-wise, they're probably one of the weaker sides in the league, in my personal opinion, other than in the forward line, where I think St. Maximan and Wilson are actually quite good. So that's kind of my worry with Newcastle. I think that will have positive effects for the Newcastle front line, though. So hopefully, I think the situation would be players like Wilson and St. Maximan will kind of kick on and do well. I 100% agree, FPL Robbie. Yeah, I'm in the same kind of line of thinking with you in terms of prioritizing Jota this week over a Chelsea defender. Um, you like King too. You're not sure about current about prices. Yeah, I think. I mean, are you arguing that King is a little bit overpriced, or because I think you also have to factor in that inflation has come in. A lot of people have inflated team values now, right? So that kind of price I think isn't too bad at this point in the season. Um, Hey Fran, which one of these three would you bench? Antonio, Foden, Dennis. Many thanks. I'd probably bench Dennis, my friend. It's tricky though. I think the Foden situation, maybe you take that chance because for me, I think Pep will probably not play him if possible. So I'd bench Dennis. And then if Foden doesn't play at all, then Dennis would come on. Would you take Bernardo for Rafinha for the near future? I would definitely think about that, sure. I think it's a nice transfer, especially after Rafinha's fixtures dry up. So as we were kind of talking about Rafinha previously, Rafinha's fixtures dry up around the 15 post, and so that's where I'd probably think about going Bernardo. Vinay says, "Hey Fran, Chilwell and Foden out for James Alonso." I'd be happy with those moves. I'd probably go for Jota for now. Am I a university student? I'm no longer a university student. I've graduated for a few years now, so I'm actually working. You think you should have Mahrez in for this week? He's due to bag. Yeah, but I mean, like a 1 week. Are we looking at like a small punt for Mahrez, or you think that he'll do well over this kind of consistent period? I think the issue with him is he's kind of been trading his minutes with Jesus, right, at times, and it seems like he was prioritized for some of the Champions League games. So we'll see what happens. I just don't think that Mahrez is that worth it because he's not as nailed as some of the other midfielders. Mane and Antonio out for Son and Vardy. Honestly, I think you're taking out a great player who's in great form in Mane, and someone who's not in the best of form in Antonio for two people who are not in form at all. So for me, I don't think it's worth it. Why no one is talking about Lucas Moura? I think people were interested in Lucas Moura after the game versus Vitesse and kind of looking at how he performs in the 3-4-3 structure. But I think people were probably expecting them to play a 3-5-2. They aren't playing a 3-5-2. They're playing the 3-4-3. And I agree with you. Maybe Lucas Moura should be mentioned a little bit more. But it once again depends on the situation. Yes, I'm checking Twitter DMs. I'll check them in a second. Foden, Benrahma replacements. Benrahma, I would say Gallagher and Cornet are nice picks. Foden replacements, I'd probably say Jota or Bernardo Silva. Do you think that Alonso is a risk? I don't really think Alonso is a huge risk, and I do think that the best Chilwell replacement is indeed Reece James. What team do I support? I actually support Real Madrid. My family is from Madrid in Spain, but I'm actually from Hong Kong, or I live in Hong Kong rather, or I used to. I mean, I live in London now, but thoughts on Havertz/Chilwell out for Jota Alonso? I think that's been a very standard transfer this week, and I'd be happy for you to do that, especially since you have the free transfers. I think that's a good move. Especially if you already have James, I'd prioritize James over Alonso. Best City attacking asset in a few game weeks for their fixture run is it Silva because of how nailed he is. Honest, I'd probably actually say it's still going to be Foden, in my opinion, and then Bernardo Silva as a close second. The thing with the City midfielders though is that it always is a question about having individual large hauls. For example, if we look at someone like Ferran Torres, who played a bunch of games, right? He only held in one massive game. You'll see the same kind of stat line with someone like Foden, where a lot of games where he's not done too much, maybe one assist here or there, and then an explosion. Bernardo Silva is a little bit interesting because I actually think he's a bit more consistent than most. So we have at least 4 weeks where he's had individual hauls, which is quite nice in my opinion. I think Bernardo Silva feels like someone you'd like to actively own just because he chips in almost every game and you don't have to target him for specific fixtures. Why did you choose Jota over Bernardo Silva? I just think that the fixture is slightly better, and that's how I feel. Dan, when you took Chilwell, I didn't have money, so I took James. Honestly, Chirag, I'm really happy that you took James, so that's awesome. It's more of a one-week punt, seeing as how Foden is questionable and Grealish and KDB are still out, and Pep would need Amaris to break down West Ham's tough defensive structure. I see what you mean for sure, but for me, like I've decided to pick Jota just because I think the fixture for Southampton is a bit nicer than West Ham, right? Did Marin Cilic just tweet? I don't actually know he plays FPL. That's hilarious. I mean, if I was in his position, I would definitely just play Rafinha, and then I would just roll, in a sense. But alright, let's actually look at people's questions. This is what I'm going with this week. You need Chilwell replacement. Confused between Alonso. I think Reguilon's a trap. Honest to God, I think Alonso's the person you want. Hi, bro. You have this for this game week. Should you take a hit to get Foden out for someone else? No, I don't think so, because no, I don't think so, because I think you've got a strong bench this week. I would no. Keep this team. I'm very, very happy with this team. I think having 2 Man City midfielders is such an interesting differential as well, so definitely keep that. Rate your team. Antonio Tabardi and Semedo to Ben Johnson -4, 1.7 mil in the bank. I guess the 1.7 mil in the bank probably will find its way towards the midfield, perhaps, and maybe upgrading Semedo. I think this team needs a stronger defense, though, in my opinion. I think I can't really see why you'd like to go to Vardy this week. I really don't think that it makes sense to have such a weak defense. I would try and get Cancelo as a priority, if anything. Like I would rather you push that money out of your midfield and forwards, or rather out of your forwards. Let's say Antonio into another improved defender. I know the fixtures are nice for all the players that you have in the back line, but I think going forwards, you can't miss out on these Cancelo hauls, these James hauls, and things like that. So if anything, why not just roll the transfer this week? And then actually spend the transfers pushing the money out of Antonio in the next week into better defenders, right? And maybe improving one of Tierney as well, Tierney and Semedo. That's my genuine opinion. I really think that you need a Chelsea fullback and a City fullback. Thinking Jota to Foden, playing Duffy ahead of Antonio and Mbumo. I kind of like Duffy because if we actually look at Brighton versus Leeds head-to-head. If I remember last season, I think Brighton did extremely well versus Leeds. Yeah, so Brighton actually kept 2 clean sheets versus Leeds, so it could be a good shout to play Duffy. Something you forgot to mention, you do 2-3 transfers. I could do Chill to James and Ron to Kane and have 0 in the back at the end of the week. Should you do this instead of just Chill to Alonso? That's a good shout, actually. I would probably go Chilwell to James. I would actually rather you maybe not go to Kane because it doesn't seem like he's in the best of form right now. I wonder if you actually keep Ronaldo for the period. The other thing I'd like you to look at is maybe moving away from Marcel if he doesn't get to play, basically, because clearly he has no value in your team anymore. And then maybe just holding 1 transfer this week. Maybe just keep it simple by going Chilwell to James. Is this a good team? I think it's missing a Chelsea fullback and Trent. So that's kind of my worry with this team. I'd rather you try and maybe move away from, let's say, someone like Vardy in the near future, because I really don't believe in premiums at all. I would rather you just move that money slowly into defenders. I think it's a decent team for this game week, but going forwards, you need to try to funnel your money into the defense and improve your defense this season, because the value for money for the defenders has been sky high, and that's not going to change in my opinion. Brandon. So your team, what can you do with Bowen or Antonio in this game week? And I'm curious as to what would happen in the Liverpool game. I mean, if the Liverpool game gets called off, nothing happens. We just lose all our points. We don't get any benefits, but there would be a double game week to make up for it eventually, I think. So that's the issue there. And so yet another question, what can I do with Bowen or Antonio next game week? Honestly, I'd probably move away from Antonio because he costs more money in the team and he's holding up more money in your team. So if you don't want to play with Antonio over the next few weeks, then why not just kind of move him into maybe potentially, a better midfielder, someone like Jota. To change Sarr and Foden, I would probably do that, right? Because you're kind of forced to play Liverpool this week. I would probably just go into Jota and maybe someone like Gallagher this week, or I mean, Smith Rowe is a bit of a weird transfer because I think you already have Aubameyang. I wouldn't really double up on Arsenal attack. I would probably think about either one of Gallagher or Cornet to be paired alongside Jota. What do you think of Havertz to Jota for a -4, or should you wait for the next game week? I'd be happy to do that, to be honest. But I think, given that Lukaku seems to still be injured, maybe it's not worth to take that -4. But I personally would make that move. You took a hit to go Chilwell to Alonso, had 0 in the bank. Do you think you need to plan for James at some point? I agree. I think you can plan for James. Let's say if we look at Chelsea fixtures, right? I think there are a few tough ones. Maybe if you plan to get James post West Ham, that's quite a nice fixture point to get James again. FPL Hosey. What are we thinking, Fran? Tempted to do Foden to Jota and then Marcel to Alonso following week. I like that move a lot. Happy with that. Who do you have in the bench this week? Yeah, unfortunately, Marcel. Actually, you've already done your transfers. You brought in James for Jota and then Chilwell plus Foden for -4. Don't know if it was a smart move to take a hit. I mean, I've done similar transfers to you, so I can completely understand. However, you want to ask if you should get in Alonso for White by next week or get a City midfielder instead. I think we can probably watch Bernardo Silva for another week, but for me, it seems like Alonso is probably going to be locked down for that position, and as I said this season, the back four seems to be the play, so I would probably be a little bit more swayed towards the Alonso thing being a priority in a sense, and then maybe you can consider moving away from Rafinha later on, so that you can go into a City midfielder, right? Let's have a look at Will's team. You've done Chilwell to James already. So 0 free transfers. Thinking Mbeumo to Gallagher next week. Currently 1.4. Yeah, I think those are nice moves because obviously you've got another good week for Hwang. Antonio actually has an okay week next week. Tony still has decent fixtures, and the only issue is double Brentford. So yeah, happy with that. So Bob, should you replace Chilwell with Alonso for a -4? I really don't think that's a play this week. Because I think you've got Rafinha for yourself, so I would just rather play Rafinha. I would actually just play Rafinha and not take the -4. That's my opinion. You can move to Alonso in the next week. Thoughts? You've got Gray. Honestly, I'm happy with this team. Plays itself this week. Very simple, decent bench as well for the next few game weeks. Post Liverpool, Livermento. So that's nice. Cool. All right, let's go back to YouTube chat quickly. If you haven't already, I'd really appreciate if you guys could like the video. That'd be really helpful. Okay. Quite a few chats that I missed, actually. Sorry. Apologies, guys. Let's see. I think definitely if you guys have someone who isn't Livermento who can actually come out of your bench this week and play for you, I think definitely the move is to play that player and not take a -4. For me, I just didn't want to play Livermento, as I said. So that was kind of my logic this week. I just think that Livermento is a tough fixture. We saw, for example, like if you look at Arsenal defender last week, right? Like someone like Ben White, how much points did he get last week? Like Ben White got 0 points, right? That's potentially what Livermento is set up for, because I really think Liverpool can destroy Southampton. I mean, if Norwich can score 2 goals for Southampton, then really the most creative, lethal attacking team in the league, in my opinion, can crumple Southampton. So that's kind of the worry there. So in that situation, I wouldn't really want to have Livermento, and even if it was like 1 point, right? I think Jota could probably get an assist, which would already make up the value for money in terms of the hit. So that's kind of how I feel about that, especially since Foden doesn't seem like he's ready to play. I'm just going to quickly react to most of the YouTube chats for now, and then I'll just leave my team here for a bit. Is Bernardo for Foden worth a hit if you already have Jota? I don't think so. But as I said, once again, it goes back to kind of my logical basis of how strong your bench is. Why? Let's see. He's tagged Bakar. Yeah, he's tagged Bakar. I saw that. Marin Cilic. That's so funny. Maybe one day he'll tag me. Who knows? Um, why do you think if you go to Jota, Foden would perform very well in the future? I think Foden can still perform very well in the future. That's not an issue. I think Foden's underlying stats have been fantastic. But for me, what I would say is that Jota has been really great this season. He's been exceptional. If we look at, let's say, the Premier League stats, not even on a per 90 basis, right? Let's look at things like expected goals. You see, Jota still ranks top 3 in expected goals, and that's even with the limited minutes that he's had this season. So it tells you, in a sense, how much value for money Jota is, especially as a 7.5 option. Obviously, there's some frauds here. You can see someone like Mbumo is a fraud. Aubameyang is a fraud as well, because this has been inflated by penalties, but Jota doesn't have penalties, so that's kind of the benefit there. I think Jota is quite a proven player, and yes, he missed a tap-in. I don't really care. We've seen him show fantastic kind of composure as well at times, and I think he's very good value for money. Thank you, Craig, as well. So transfer in King or Pookie. I would go for King if you can afford to keep King on the bench for a while, because for me, King has a really good set of games in the near future, whereas Pookie, it's a little bit harder to determine when I would like to consistently play him. And I would say Watford just seemed just a bit better than Norwich, but we'll have a look. Right, so basically what I'm saying is that post Man City, King has a really nice set of games here, like Brentford, Burnley, Crystal Palace. That's a nice set of games. And really, you could just play him for most of these fixtures, with exception to maybe Wolves and West Ham and Tottenham around here. Newcastle, Norwich, once again, good games. So good, real run for me to have an enabler in King around that period. Wildcard suggestion. Are you suggesting that I make a wildcard team for you, Akash, right now? Would you start Antonio or Rico Henry against Everton? Probably actually start Rico Henry, because I think Everton have been really, really poor from an offensive point of view, especially if Gray is set to miss this game as well. Then it's worth it. Diaz to Alonso for a hit. I wouldn't do that. I think Diaz has still got a really good fixture this week. And I would love to keep Diaz for this period. For me, it's more a question of, go for a back 4 or go for a back 5. Really, I'm not opposed to it at all. Yeah, I just think that I wouldn't take a hit in a game when Chelsea's playing United, especially since they're in a kind of new manager bounce period as well. And we know this United side does have quality in it. Get rid of Mendy. You mean get rid of Mendy to kind of improve the state of my bench? That could be a good option, right? I think I did consider it one time where if I, let's say, transferred out Antonio and transferred out Mendy, then that would be an option. But for now, I think I'm not that tempted to do that. So, like, what is the, maybe if I get someone like Gelhardt, right, from Leeds, who's actually consistently playing now, or at least rotation option because of Bamford, and then I, let's say, just play Foden once again into my team. Like, that's an option I can do in the next week for a -4 if I really wanted to move into a 3-5-2, and then someone like Tony can go as well in the near future, maybe be moved down to someone like King, and then I'd once again have money to upgrade another position potentially. That is something that's possible. Probably going to be going for James in the near future, so this is ideal. This is technically almost like a wildcard team that I'm thinking about now. Cody would probably have to go. Can't afford Alonso in this setup, so I guess Rafinha would have to make way. It would probably be Gallagher, to be completely honest with you, and then I would play something like Alonso. If I was wildcarding, though, I would probably take away the money from Livramento as well, and I might not even have Kane. So that's the weird kind of thing. I actually think that, especially if we look at fixtures, right, you'd be happy to keep Salah basically until the African Cup of Nations as a captaincy option. So it actually tells you that you can definitely go for like a back 5 structure. I mean, either Diaz, like going for Diaz or Reguilon, I think makes sense to me. I really would prefer Diaz. And then maybe I could go for Vardy in the setup, but Vardy has been so poor, which is a big question mark. I could also just keep Antonio over this period. I know we've talked about Spurs plenty, but that's kind of how I see things. I would really like to play a back 4 ideally. Maybe Guaita gets upgraded to Ramsdale and then Steele gets upgraded to Foster, so I lose a bit of money there. But that's really what we're talking about when we're looking at potential moves. I think either a 2-striker formation or a 1-striker formation is ideal for the season, since we've seen that Chelsea, Liverpool, and City all have fantastic defenders for us to pick from. But yeah. Let's see. How long is Foden out for? I really think Foden's going to be out for this week. Would you start Diaz or Mbumo? You already have Cancelo. I'd probably start Mbumo just to kind of benefit from Everton not being a very good team. What are my transfers? I've done Cornet and Benrahma. So you'll see I've taken a -4 this week so that I could bring in Jota, and Foden was dropped. And I've brought in Cornet as well in place of Benrahma, who's actually hitting a price decrease. Chilwell will probably go straight to James next week unless something crazy happens. And my team for the next week is probably going to look exactly like this. And then maybe, having a Chelsea defender coming in place of Cody, even though he's against Burnley. Because I still prefer, let's say, Cancelo playing versus Aston Villa and things like that. And as well, we got Antonio versus Brighton, which is quite a nice fixture. I think Bowen's a fantastic buy, Ryan. I completely agree with you there. I think Bowen, either if you get Bowen on 16 or 18, fantastic fixture kind of positions. Except Ramsdale, who is, I think if you don't go for Ramsdale, I think you should go for Guaita, in my opinion. And then I actually think that everyone's bench keeper should be Foster. Who should you start? Foden, White, King, Tony, or Saka? Lots of Arsenal players. Definitely not King this week, I think. I would play Tony versus Everton. I'd probably play Foden just to risk it, and then I'd probably play Saka just to risk it as well. Foden's dropping tonight? Is he dropping tonight? I wasn't aware of that. Seems like James is going up tonight. Gray is going down tonight. Foden is pretty close to a decrease. Pretty happy I took him out then, in that case. He could be, but I wouldn't say that's guaranteed. Marcel's actually also close to a drop, so that's a little bit unfortunate for any Marcel owners. I completely understand why some people are dropping Marcel in that case. Can you afford Chilwell to James? I think it's worth another hit. Yeah, but is it worth another hit versus United though? And who would I drop this week, right? So I would drop Antonio maybe, or or Rafinha. I just can't really see why I would take that hit. It's just not that justified in my opinion. I really think that United could take away that Chelsea clean sheet this week. That's just my personal opinion, though. Jimenez, White, and Livramento to Davis, James, and Alonso for a -4. Jimenez, okay. White and Livramento. The thing is, I would not take away Jimenez this week, my friend. And I wouldn't make those transfers away to James Alonso for this week. I still think the United game is a tough game. Hey Sahaj, really nice to see you around actually. I do prefer Cornet to Smith Rowe. We can actually talk about the underlying stats as well. So let's actually have a look at Arsenal. We can do a quick comparison as well, and I'll show you something that I was working on a few weeks ago. So the information on this is not updated. We'll look at updated information quickly. This was a brief kind of analysis of the value for money for players on a kind of per match basis, and Cornet and Smith Rowe ranked similarly, although I'd say Cornet has slightly better fixtures, and I think Smith Rowe's price has changed since then. He's probably closer to 5.9 if I remember. Smith Rowe is 5.9. So you can actually see that his value is slightly dropped. So this is kind of like an efficiency metric that I've created. I think Cornet scored in the previous match, so Cornet should actually trend upwards, and Smith Rowe should trend downwards. So for me, when you look at the Arsenal fixtures, I would say that Cornet has better fixtures. I think Tottenham actually isn't that tough a game. We've seen, honestly, Tottenham be, frankly, quite terrible the last few weeks. The set of games up until, let's say, the Man United fixture for me are fantastic. West Ham is the only tough game there, and they're still playing at home at least. Whereas with Smith Rowe, you've got a great Newcastle game this week, a tough Man United game, similar kind of fixtures as well. And then maybe actually, I would actually rather maybe pick up Smith Rowe somewhere like, let's say, after the United game potentially. But Smith Rowe's underlying stats was actually why I made the difference. I think their fixtures are kind of similar. If I just show you underlying stats for Arsenal. So if we look at XG and XA, we can see that Smith Rowe ranks actually around 6th for Arsenal. So 0.33, that's incredibly low, guys, for someone who's actually managed, a decent amount of hauls in terms of goals and assists this period. Sorry, 0.18. So he's managed 4 goals. So like the overperformance in a sense that Smith Rowe has created over that kind of run of games is frankly quite fantastic. 0.29 is his overall XG plus XA. I don't think Cornet has a tremendously high one himself. And we know as well with general stats that things tend to regress, but this is Cornet, right? Cornet is around 0.40. I think that's roughly 33% higher than Smith Rowe. And for me, that's what's interesting about Cornet. It seems like he's quite a clinical player when you actually watch him play, and he's also technically playing out of position as well. So that's why I rate Cornet just a bit higher, although Gallagher is an interesting option too. Will Tsimikas start? I don't actually think Tsimikas will start. I think Robertson will play, because I think Tsimikas was playing in the European game. Robertson came on as a sub. Maybe we'll see what happens. It depends on what Klopp feels in terms of, let's say, resting Robertson adequately, but I think Robertson is a priority. Thoughts on Leicester City FC? I definitely think that we should target Leicester. When we have a good team versus Leicester, we should no longer be scared in a sense of playing a specific player versus Leicester, and we shouldn't look at them as a strong defense. But obviously, when it comes down to a game like Leicester and Watford, not so sure I'd still like to play a Watford player. I wouldn't target Leicester with every team, basically. Keep Raf and Mbumo in wildcard is good. I would not keep Mbumo in a wildcard whatsoever. I think Raf could be an okay option. Jota, Salah, Bernardo, fantastic picks in my opinion. I would not keep Mbumo. I just don't think he's been interesting. Unfortunately, it reaches a point where, kind of like a Traore, you got to move on from a player that has interesting underlying stats but hasn't provided anything. The interesting thing about Cornet, though, is that he scored 5 goals, so he's clearly not a fraud, if that makes sense. Like, we have to take into account how clinical a player has been, even if the sample size is small. Play Rudiger or Antonio? Maybe I would probably play Rudiger. That's kind of my personal opinion on that. Who should you play, Wilson or Pukki? I'd probably play Wilson this week, even though he is risking the kind of yellow card. I just think that this Newcastle team seem to be quite high producing in terms of kind of offensive chances, and then Norwich, I really think we're quite lucky to get those 2 goals for Southampton. They still look like a very poor team. Watford are Wolves. Are quite a good defense. Should Foden be a transfer out for the next week? I think so. So I think Foden should be a transfer out this week, right? Because there's a high chance he doesn't really play the game, or at least he won't contribute in the game. It might be one of those performances where he comes in a little bit late in the game, maybe plays a few minutes. But I really think that Pep Guardiola's preference is to actually rest him for this week. Smith Rowe or Wilson to start. I'd definitely play Smith Rowe over Wilson, in my opinion. Will Stones. Sorry, who's Will Stones? Will Stones and Christensen start this game week? I think Stones will start this. It's a tricky question. Does he play Diaz and Laporte? I guess is a good question. I think Stones will play, actually. That's my opinion. I'm not so sure about Christensen, though. Josh McRae. 2 free transfers. Chilwell and Havertz to Jota and James. Really happy with that, Josh. I think that's fine. Wildcard team. Foster, Ramsdale, James, Arnold, Reguilon, Cancelo, and Marty. I would take a Marty out of your team for sure. Surely you could just go for Ben Johnson, right? I'd rather you have a playing player. Son, Salah, Smith Rowe, Gallagher, Winks. Why do you have Winks in your team? Is Winks just a 4.5 option? 4.4, fair enough, okay. Lukaku, Hwang, Dennis. I feel like Hwang's an interesting pick. Lukaku is a little bit questionable for me, because I think I'm not even sure what the exact state of his injury is. It seems like that's a bit of murky territory. I also think that with Salah, as I said, we have a captaincy option. What is the point of going for a threemium, Akash? I think basically, for a lot of, let's say, more rookie players, the threemium is so interesting because you think, these players are due for fantastic hauls every week. But if I show you, let's say, the efficiency of the forwards that I was actually conducting an analysis in a few weeks ago, this is the efficiency of Ronaldo. This is the efficiency of Vardy. I don't have Lukaku here, but I can guarantee you he's about as efficient as both of them, and that is not efficient whatsoever. When you look at the defenders, Chilwell, sorry, I killed Chilwell off because he's dead. So let's take Chilwell out. But players like James, obviously Sarr, this is highly impacted by things like rotation. But like Trent, James, Alonso, Cancelo, these are all players who are all above 1. That's almost 2 times the efficiency of any of the premiums that we've seen. So it doesn't make sense to hold a 3-mum, in my opinion. Jota for a hit or just play, and I would probably just play Antonio, my friend. I would definitely take a hit if you were playing Livramento, though, let's say, as a first bench option. In wildcard, who's the best replacement for Mbumo in this budget? How much is Mbumo now? I guess he's dropped a little bit in price, hasn't he? Mbumo was 5.6. Are we saying we can't stretch the budget to, let's say, any higher than 5.6? So if we restrict ourselves to 5.5 midfielders, God, that's a rough list. I think you've got to stretch your cash up, my friend. No one's interested in this kind of price territory. You've got to stretch yourself to at least 6 and then probably make a move for, let's say, Smith Rowe or Gallagher. I'd be happy if you actually went for Gallagher, in my opinion. Keep it safe. For me, I've picked Cornet, a little bit of a differential, maybe a bit aggressive for me, but we'll see what happens. It seems Pep has made Laporte more nailed than Diaz. That's a good point, Nico, actually. I think Pep was probably quite interested by Laporte's performances over the Euro, and I think Laporte actually serves a very similar role to Diaz, where you're happy with him being kind of the metronome in terms of defense, right? Someone who you can frequently pass to, and he has the composure, kind of like Van Dijk, to distribute the ball. The thing is, Laporte has had some notoriously bad kind of defensive actions, in specific games, such as the red card. Even last season, for example, if you remember, Son kind of blowing by him as well and scoring. That was a good kind of opportunity there. By the way, just as a sidebar, once again, if you guys are new to the chat or new to the channel, please feel free to like the video if you're actually enjoying the content. And I always make YouTube videos on a weekly basis for you guys, especially something which is the cheat sheet that I work on consistently. Which is basically how I kind of rate all players in the game based on future fixtures and current form. So things like that will be what you can expect from the channel. Let's have a look at some of our Twitter requests. Should I take a hit to replace Livramento? Tough question. Look, I would take a hit to replace Chilwell this week. I would take Chilwell out first if you were going to replace someone, right? I don't see the point in taking Livramento out. I would take a hit to replace Chilwell for sure. If you go for Reece James or Alonso, I think you'd be happy with yourself. That's Adnan. Bro, suggest me a Foden and Benrahma replacement. Should you go for a -4 hit? That's tough, my friend. I think Benrahma replacement, either go... I would go for Cornet. I might not want to replace Foden. I think it's worth risking... I think you just replace Benrahma this week. You keep Foden on your bench, and then Foden comes back to your team and actually plays a part in your team in the near future. I would say you take a -4 hit, you replace Benrahma instead, and you leave Foden alone, and you keep Foden for the near future. Is this actually fantasy? Because I'm not sure if this is the same thing as FPL, but I hope it works the same. But yeah, so I would keep Foden on your bench so that you can have him for the next week. Let's see. Good team. Time to move on from... I think this team plays itself very well this week. Time to move on from Rafinha and Smith Rowe and fill up money in defense. You could do that, but I'd rather you fill up money in defense by actually taking out someone like Vardy in your team. Did I just miss out who's on your bench? I don't really know who's on your bench as well, so that's another kind of factor into things. I think your midfield's quite interesting. Nothing really wrong with that, to be honest. I think they've all been hauling quite consistently. Perhaps it's actually just a case of you maybe getting a fullback in your team, someone like Cancelo or James, and maybe Vardy has to make way if, let's say, Vardy misses a haul and blanks again. FPL AD, start Tierney or Antonio. I'd be happy with you actually playing Tierney. I think that's the better fixture, and hopefully he plays, especially since I think Nuno Tavares had a, in a sense, notoriously bad performance last week, and hopefully Tierney is someone that Arteta thinks is rested enough to be able to play and hopefully haul versus Newcastle. Schmeichel to absolutely anyone for -4. He's not worth the money right now. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think you just go for Ramsdale. You play it safe. Ramsdale has been a fantastic keeper this season. Inquire says, hey Fran, I had 2 free transfers this week. Did Benrahma to Cornet and Alan to Gallagher. 1.7 million in the bank. I think that's a good decision. You're benching Ronaldo this week. That's a big decision, my friend. But fair enough. If you, I would not really bench a premium ever. I know it's Chelsea, but still a good week to have Ronaldo. Is it worth taking out Ronaldo and Christensen for Trent and a cheap striker for a hit? I would say, Jack, is it worth taking out Ronaldo and Christensen for Trent? I would definitely, yeah, I'd probably make that move. I guess you can go for King. Ankas, thank you so much. Have a great green arrow this week. I hope I get a green arrow. Probably not going to be the case, to be honest, Anka, but I hope you have a green arrow instead in my place if it comes down to that. So thank you so much for the support as well. I've always seen you around the channel, so thank you once again for being around and staying and supporting. And Boomo took Gallagher for a -4 to beat the price rise, otherwise unaffordable. Yeah, fair enough. I guess you can see it as a good Gallagher kind of long-term move, right? Because Gallagher is someone, frankly, I would be happy to own for quite a... For example, like, let's say if I wanted to move away from Rafinha, a good price downgrade would really be Gallagher, because let's say if I get Gallagher for this week, I'd be happy to keep Gallagher all the way into... Honestly, I would actually keep Gallagher for this entire run. I would only bench him for the United game, maybe, if, let's say, Ranić actually looks interesting as a manager. Bench him for the Liverpool game. I mean, you can keep him up until forever, really. For me, like, if we look across the league, I think at some key stats that I'd like to point out to anyone who's actually interested. For me, a good stat that I actually used to pick Grealish last season very early on was a stat such as shot creating actions. Now, of course, Grealish has had a very poor season this year, and he still ranks very high in this kind of category. But shot creating actions and goal creating actions per 90, for me, is always a good indicator of a good player, so long as they kind of meet some of the metrics and have passed the eye test in a sense. So we'll see some frauds here. We'll see some interesting players, but you'll see that Gallagher actually ranks both in goal creating actions and shot creating actions. Shot creating actions is something where you look at just genuine shot building opportunities. These are players who you'd argue are a little bit more creative. Adama Traore makes sense because he's a player who actually spams a lot of crosses into the box. He also beats his defender very often, so he gets a lot more opportunities to do this, but we know, in a sense, he's been a fraud. And this is a per 90 metric, which is why he doesn't feature in this kind of... where he probably doesn't feature here, sorry, in terms of the total metrics, right? So you can see that Gallagher actually has the flat numbers to back it up. He's top 3 in the league in terms of shot creating actions. That tells you how impactful he actually is. Top 4, sorry, in the league in terms of shot creating actions. That tells you how impactful he is in terms of actually creating shots across the board. So he's very, very good up there. In terms of other things such as goal creating actions, that shows you actual translations into opportunities that were actually finalized in a sense, right? So you can see he's second here in terms of the actual flat number. So definitely I think Gallagher is interesting, and not only that, it's because he also takes set pieces. So for me, Gallagher is a very interesting central piece to this Crystal Palace team over a very nice fixture run since they've already played Chelsea, Liverpool, and City once. And I think you'd be happy to keep him for a large part of the season. Is it worth to buy Alonso? I think so, if you don't have any problems in your team, and that's always kind of what I've justified. Hi, Fran, joined late. Let's made it -8. Honestly, I hope you've got a fantastic Jota haul up ahead. I think the only thing stopping a Jota haul might be the weather this week, apparently. So let's hope that doesn't happen, and we'll see what happens. Dino Souls, got 1 mil in the bank. Any improvements? So for this week, I would actually say that you've got a really lovely team. Perhaps it's actually worth... Maybe I would actually say it's worth rolling the transfer and then maybe moving the money out of Antonio. Because I can definitely see yourself even going into a back 5 if you'd like. I know not everyone really likes going to the back 5. I know it makes people uncomfortable, but that's an option. I would actually say that your team, however, for this week is totally fine. I'd be very happy to have Antonio as my first bench option this week, since a lot of people across the league are dealing with very, very poor benches due to the injury concerns and whatnot. Perhaps... as I said, it makes sense to probably go into Jota, which is why I would rather you save up the money with Antonio and maybe move away from Antonio and then go into someone like Jota. If let's say Jota seems to be a recurring good option. Foden, of course, is another alternative too around that price point. So Jaden has a team here. He's playing Watkins. Very interesting. So Watkins is someone I mentioned that has really, really good kind of attacking numbers. Of course, you're still playing in a very deep back 3. I suppose the only improvements really would just be to move that money in the next week from Chilwell to Alonso or James. I'm sure you'll do that in due time. I'm not sure how much Rice actually costs, but probably he could be turned into a bench option. I would actually arguably say that your bench, if once you replace Chilwell, is a little bit too strong. So it might be a case of, let's say, slowly trimming down your bench in the near future and actually making sure you improve your starting 10 just a little bit. Light skin Tony Allen, what do you think? Wanted to swap Rudiger for Chilwell, but that's over. I guess the Chilwell news was fantastic for you then in that sense. I think your team is great this week. Once again, it's probably a situation where we watch Antonio again, have a look at whether he's interesting, whether he hauls. If he still looks a little bit disinterested, or not as effective as before, then maybe we could try to redistribute some of the money from Antonio into someone like Jota. So you kind of have a similar team to actually the previous person, in my opinion. You could probably work on looking at that. And Mbumo for Jota, or you should roll the transfer. I would definitely go for Jota this week. I think it's a fantastic week. I got Benrahma out. That was my feeling personally. I just wasn't really getting enough from Benrahma, so that's kind of my worry with Benrahma and why he's found his way out of my team. Do I think Marcel from Wolves will play? I thought Aït-Nouri had quite a good game versus West Ham, and I genuinely feel like that might not be the case. Best 3 forwards for wildcard team upcoming fixtures. Akash, as I said, so I generally think that you can move your money into defenders and midfielders, but if you really want 3 forwards for the upcoming fixtures, I like Dennis, yes, because he's a long-term hold, and then Hwang, you can kind of capitalize on him for the next 2 weeks. I'm really not sure about Lukaku, my friend. I'd probably be even tempted to go for Vardy, who's a little bit cheaper. I know you had a 3-million structure, so as I said, there might even be an opportunity for you to not even play Lukaku at all and play for someone cheaper, someone like Wilson or someone like Saint-Maximin. When will we get the next wild card? So the wild card actually kind of reappears in the second half of the season. So given the fact that we have 38 games per season, you'll get your wild card on Game Week 20. So that's exactly where it's going to appear for you. So it's quite a long ways away. But this December fixture period, Game Week 20 actually is still within December. So the games will go so quickly that you won't even notice, and sooner or later you'll actually have your wild card with you, my friend. So we'll see what happens there. Jimenez for Antonio to save some money, I think that's fine, and you'd be attacking the Norwich fixture, which is something that I think is a justified move. Gray to Jota or Duffy to James. I would prefer Gray to Jota this week. I think it's a much more sensible transfer than playing James versus United. I think James is clearly, either the first or second best right back in the world in terms of form and production, and yes, he clearly seems to be a priority for a lot of us, but this week I would say Jota makes a bit more sense. Jerome, you still haven't used your first wildcard yet. Honestly, Jerome, you're a madman, but I respect that. I can actually honestly say that it was probably in hindsight a mistake that I made such an early wildcard, and especially since I was already in a good position. Definitely, when I look back at it, I think Game Week 8 was the best wildcard possible, because if you look at my suggested wildcard team at that point in time, I was suggesting players like Hwang and Ramsdale, and those were kind of key players who made a huge difference. Good forwards. That's a good question. I think the forwards will change in the near future. First of all, what I would say with the forwards is keep in mind that Bamford will probably come back soon. Dominic Calvert-Lewin will come back soon, but they might not be that kind of affordable. I would actually say Watkins is quite a big differential, and especially with a new manager, we could benefit from Watkins, let's say, post this kind of Liverpool game where there's a decent, in a sense, run up until the end of the season. I would say this is a really rough patch still for Aston Villa, so a bit of time for Gerrard to kind of prove himself, get some good fixtures on the way, and you can maybe capitalize during this run here. But I think Watkins is a bit of a differential. A lot of people are actually looking at King, in my opinion. The reason why you go for King over Dennis is because Dennis will probably play for the African Cup of Nations, or in the African Cup of Nations rather, and that is not something that King is included. And so King will definitely play over this fantastic kind of fixture run post 15, where I think you'd be happy to play him in most games, as I said, up until 24-ish, and maybe you can miss out on one of the 2 games there. If, let's say, Tottenham get their defense in order. Ronaldo, of course, is someone we have to keep our eyes on. I think, honestly, post-Chelsea, you've got a fantastic run. I would include Arsenal there because you're playing at Old Trafford at home, and you've got that new manager bounce versus Arsenal. Tony is someone who's falling off the map in a sense, but I still think he's got lovely fixtures up until, let's say, the United game. So that's the question mark there. I think Tony just isn't that much value for money. Armstrong is okay, but the fixtures are getting rough for Southampton, so that's a little bit of a tricky thing. Hwang and Jimenez have a little bit more of a short-term kind of scenario where they've got great fixtures and then a bad run. up until basically 22. So that's what I'd be worried about, especially if you're owning Wolves assets. You'd probably move away from them. Newcastle actually have a really good run, so you could probably either delineate between either Wilson, Joel Linton, maybe, because he's actually looked quite good under Eddie Howe, and Alante Maximan. So the forwards is actually probably the position where we'll see the most change over the next few weeks. If you look at my cheat sheet, this is kind of how I justify most players at this point in time. I think Benteke is a fantastic option that I didn't mention previously, but he's up there for sure. So I'll keep my cheat sheet up here for now as you guys look at that, and then we can kind of look back into the YouTube chat quickly. If you're new to the channel, though, please feel free to drop a like and a subscription. That would be really, really supported. That would really help with the algorithm too. Should you transfer out Diaz for one of Reguilon, James, or Alonso? I would probably go... I wouldn't transfer out Diaz necessarily. I would actually rather you go for a back four or back five. I actually think that Diaz has really good runs over the December period. If, let's say, Diaz gets benched again, then 100% it's time to move over Diaz. But I think that we are just a bit worried because Diaz got rested in the previous week. But the idea is that you keep Diaz in the near future because he probably plays the next few games. You're so sick of Kane, but there's just no other option. That's exactly the point. And I'm in the same position there where I'm just going to have to survive Kane in this terrible fixture run and then probably just play Ronaldo instead. And that's probably how I'm going to live through that. Someone's going to captain Lukaku. They know what engine forced me to move Salah. Yeah, I completely understand, guys. I mean, non-captaining Salah has been everyone's mistake this season, to be quite frank. I think last week some people benefited from, let's say, going for Cancelo. So there are sometimes options that are interesting, but for now, not too much has changed. Salah is definitely that kind of hard captaincy option. I just think it's just about what are the justifiable risks. I think it's better off to have risks in your playing 11, right, than having than kind of fighting the Salah captaincy. So most of the people who unfortunately captained Havertz, which was still, I guess, quite an educated decision, because would you really say that Salah's best haul would be versus United? I don't think anyone would justify that, right? So that was a shocking result. So yeah, I mean, it's very unfortunate there. But I think that's it for me, guys, this week in terms of the stream. So glad to see so many of you guys in the stream. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you guys have a wonderful game week ahead, and I hope you guys kill it. So I'll see you guys very soon. Take care and have a lovely week.